Montana Territory, 1882. The wind scraped like sandpaper through the alley behind the Iron Nickel Saloon, but it was the sound of the mop slapping against the floorboards that filled the night. Sylvie Whitlow had been scrubbing those saloon floors for Pennies since she was 15. Now 22, her knees were raw, her hands cracked, and her back screamed with every hour spent bent over lye-soaked wood. She had no choice. After her father died in a mining collapse and her mother fell ill and passed a winter later, there had been no one left. No family. No land. Just debt. And the saloon owner who offered her room, board, and a job that stripped her soul a little more each day. She scrubbed until her fingers bled, then scrubbed more. "Do not miss a spot," barked Mr. Flint, the saloon's owner, as he slammed a bucket beside her. "You missed under the piano again. Do it right or go hungry." Sylvie kept her eyes down. "Yes, sir." The saloon was empty now, save the clatter of chairs being stacked and the cold bite of dawn sneaking in through the warped windows. She moved toward the corner, her legs trembling. That was when the door creaked open and boots stepped across the threshold, not the kind of boots she recognized. Not the heavy, angry stomp of a drunk, not the sharp clink of spurred gamblers. These were quiet, steady steps measured. Calm. Sylvie looked up. A man stood there, tall, lean, with a weathered trail coat and dust on his shoulders. His eyes were a pale gray blue, like the sky right before a snowstorm. He pulled off his hat, revealing dark hair and a sharp jaw, and gave her a nod. "I am looking for someone who can point me to the Broken Sea Ranch," he said. Mr. Flint stepped forward from the back. "You are looking at the wrong place. We are not a map, cowboy." The man did not flinch. "Was not talking to you." Sylvie blinked, confused. "Broken Sea is about 15 miles west, near the Cottonwood Grove. You pass the split in the hills and follow the creek." He glanced at her mop, her hands, then her eyes. "You work here?" She hesitated. "Yes." "You should not," Mr. Flint scoffed. "She is lucky I let her stay. Girl like that, no family, no money, she would be dead in a week without me." The man's jaw tightened. "There is a difference between keeping someone alive and keeping them in chains." Sylvie looked away, heart pounding. He stepped closer, voice low. "What is your name, Sylvie?" she whispered. He extended a hand, rough from reins and rope, but clean. "Silas Ward." She did not take his hand. She could not with dirt under her nails and shame in her gut. His voice softened. "You deserve better than this, Sylvie." She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever said such a thing to her. Not once. Silas turned back to Flint. "When was the last time you paid her proper wages? I feed her. She has a roof. That is more than most get." Silas's voice dropped to something colder. "You feed a mule too, but it is still slavery." Flint narrowed his eyes. "She is not your business." Silas's hand shifted to his belt near his holster. "She is now." That was when Flint laughed. "You gonna take her? What, make her your little wife? She is a floor girl, cowboy, a beggar in rags." Silas looked over at Sylvie again, not with pity, not with mockery. Just calm, quiet certainty. "She deserves a palace in my arms, not a mop in hers," he said. Sylvie barely breathed. Flint spat on the floor. "Fine, take her, but she leaves with nothing, not even the shoes she stands in." Silas stepped forward and threw a coin pouch on the bar. "That should cover her boots and a clean dress." Flint counted, grumbling. "That is too much." Silas did not answer. He simply walked to Sylvie and offered his hand again. This time she took it. Her fingers trembled, but his were steady. He led her outside like she was made of glass. The sun had just begun to rise over the frost-tipped ridge. The world felt bigger than it had in years. "I do not know where to go," she said quietly. "You do not need to know yet." They reached his horse, a tall roan with kind eyes. Silas helped her up, then mounted behind her, careful not to crowd her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He guided the reins gently. Because I remember what it feels like to be left behind. She turned slightly to look at him. You were. My father died in the war. My mother scrubbed laundry for soldiers just to feed me. I swore when I got older, I would never let someone be treated like she was. The wind stung her cheeks, but it was not cruel anymore. It felt like air she could finally breathe. They rode west, the land opening up around them. By noon, they stopped near a creek. Sela's unpacked coffee and jerky, handing her a blanket to sit on. Sylvie sat carefully, unsure how to be in this new space. She looked down at her hands, still red from scrubbing. I am not someone who fits into a palace, she said. Sela's poured hot water into a tin cup. Then I will build one that fits you. She looked up, eyes searching his. You do not even know me. His smile was quiet. I know you worked hard when no one helped you. I know you are still standing. That is enough for now. She sipped the coffee. It was bitter, but it warmed her. Like his words. They rode again, slower this time, shadows growing long behind them. By dusk, the cottonwoods came into view, and beyond them, the wide stretch of the Broken Sea Ranch. A white porch wrapped around a big house, barns lined in neat rows, windmill spinning steady. This is yours, she asked, stunned. It was my uncle's. He left it to me. It is. Too much. He dismounted and helped her down gently. No. It is just enough. As they stepped onto the porch, Sylvie paused, her eyes full. Sela's looked down at her. There is no rush. You can stay as long as you like. Decide what you want. I will never make you earn your place. She nodded, tears slipping down without her meaning to. I do not want to scrub floors anymore. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. You never have to again. And for the first time in years, Sylvie believed it. The guest room smelled of pine soap and old quilts. Sylvie stood near the doorway, boots drying beside the stove, the hem of her new calico dress brushing her ankles. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived, not out of fear, but caution. The quiet here was thick but kind, like a heavy wool coat you had to get used to wearing. Sela's poured water from the kettle into a shallow basin and set it on the washstand. There's hot bread in the kitchen. I'll leave you be for a while. She nodded, unsure what to say. He didn't ask questions she couldn't answer, and he didn't fill silences with words he didn't mean. When he left, she sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped soft beneath her, not like the straw ticking she'd known. She stared at the stitched stars on the quilt, her hands resting in her lap, still unused to being idle. She didn't go down for supper until the moon hung high. The kitchen was lit by oil lamp, its flame steady. Sela sat at the table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a book open before him. He closed it when he saw her. I thought you might be asleep. I tried, she said, fingers tracing the edge of the doorway. Didn't take. He stood, pulled out the chair across from his. She sat, eyes drifting to the plate already set for her warm cornbread, beans, and slices of apple. You didn't have to wait. I wasn't tired. You always read when you can't sleep, sometimes. Other times I walk the fence line or fix what needs fixing. She picked at the cornbread. You read much. Enough to know I prefer doing things with my hands, but I like the quiet of books. He poured her a cup of milk from the pitcher. She drank, the coolness grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. You make all this yourself? She asked. I had help from a neighbor when I first took over, but most of it, yeah. She looked around at the clean counters, polished stovetop, glass jars lined in rows. You keep it tidy. It's easier to breathe in order. She folded her hands. I wouldn't know. He leaned back, studying her with a kind of patience that didn't press. You're not expected to become someone else here. I don't know who I am without work. There's plenty of that if you want it, but you don't have to earn your place, not here. She looked down. I'm not used to that either. They sat a while, the ticking of the clock filling the space between them. Finally, she said, I could help with the chickens. I know how to collect eggs without spooking them." He nodded. "Then we'll start there." The next morning began before the sun had fully crested, the grass still damp with dew. Sylvie followed Silas past the barn, her skirts tucked up, her hands steady despite the chill. The hens clucked low and suspicious, but she moved slow, letting them get used to her. "You've done this before," he said. "My mother kept a few. They were mean, but I was meaner back then." He chuckled, brief and low. "I'd like to have met that girl. She wouldn't have trusted you. And now she's watching." They carried the basket back together, full and warm. She watched him along the way, how he checked the fence posts without being told, how his eyes scanned the sky like he was listening to something larger than himself. That afternoon, while he repaired a broken shutter on the barn, she sat on the porch steps, mending a tear in one of the older blankets. Her stitches were uneven, but they held. She didn't like idleness. Her fingers needed something to do. "I was thinking," he said when he joined her, wiping his hands on a rag, "we could go into town next week. Get you what you need." She paused, needle frozen mid-air. "I'd rather not go back there yet. We can wait." She glanced up. "Why are you being so careful with me?" He sat beside her, leaving space but not distance. "Because you've had enough rough edges. I figure you deserve a soft start. No one ever gave me one before. Then I'll be the first." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Her shoulders eased just slightly, and the thread in her hand pulled tight and clean through the fabric. That evening, as the sky dimmed to deep violet, they sat by the hearth. He carved a new handle for a hoe. She read a page from his book aloud, stumbling over the longer words. He didn't laugh, just let her go slow. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect? Someone who'd take what they wanted and leave. I'm not going anywhere." She searched his face, the firelight playing across the angles. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." She looked down at her lap, then back at him. "Then I'll stay." And something changed between them, not loud, not sudden, just the quiet settling of two people beginning to belong. The frost had left the ground, and the earth was softening under the wheel ruts near the pasture fence. Sylvie carried a pail of feed, her fingers still stiff from the cold of morning, but the weight no longer pulled at her like it used to. She moved with purpose now, not from fear of reprimand, but from the quiet rhythm of belonging. Silas was mending the north fence line with a hand axe and a coil of wire over his shoulder. He had been out since first light, and when she approached, he glanced up and pushed his hat back with the crook of his wrist. "You been over to the pond yet?" "I saw the ducks yesterday. Water's still low. We'll dig it out deeper once the ground dries proper. Keeps the cattle from fouling it too fast." She set the pail down and brushed her palms on her skirt. "I can help shovel. You'll blister. I've had worse." He tied off the last length of wire and leaned against the post. "You always try to prove you can take more than you should." "I don't try. I just have." His eyes lingered on her face, not searching, just steady. "You don't have to anymore. I'm not made for sitting idle. That's not what I meant." She looked away toward the ridgeline where snow still clung in the shade. "I thought if I worked hard enough, someone might see me, not pity me." "Just see me." "I do." She turned back, startled more by the way he said it than the words themselves. Not soft, not loud, just sure. He nodded toward the barn. "I finished the shelf in the storeroom, figured you might want space to keep things. I don't have much. Doesn't matter." "It's yours." She studied him. "You keep making room for me like I belong here. You do." "I haven't done anything to deserve it. Belonging isn't something you earn. It's something you're offered." They didn't speak for a while after that. The wind moved through the grass with a hush that felt like the land exhaling. Sylvie watched him gather his tools, the way he wrapped the wire coil without haste, the way he didn't try to fill the silence. Later that day, she found herself in the storeroom, running her fingers along the edge of the new shelf. It was smooth, sanded by hand and bracketed with care. She placed her folded shawl on it, then an old hair comb she'd kept tucked in her satchel, one of the few things her mother had left her. It wasn't much, but it looked like something when set on a space made just for it. That evening, a light rain came. Sylvie stood beneath the eaves, watching the drops patter against the dirt, the smell of wet sage rising from the edge of the fields. Silas came out with 2 tin cups, one rattling slightly as he handed it to her. "Mule ear tea, not sweet, but it's warm," she sipped. "Tastes like boiled grass," he laughed under his breath. "It is boiled grass." She stepped closer to the post, the rain misting her sleeves. "I keep waiting for this to change." "For what to?" "For it to stop feeling like I'm standing in someone else's life. It's yours now if you want it. I don't know what I want yet. You don't have to." They stood there, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. Her shoulder brushed his coat and he didn't move away, didn't shift or speak. Just let her be near. She set her cup down. "I used to think wanting something meant you'd lose it, that if you hoped too loud it got taken." He looked at her, rain catching in his lashes. "What do you want now?" She inhaled slow. "To feel safe when I sleep. To stop flinching when someone raises their voice. To wake up and know I ain't got to prove anything to stay." "You've got that here," she swallowed. "It still scares me." He didn't offer comfort in words. He stepped back just enough to show he wouldn't crowd her, wouldn't take what wasn't given. Then he opened the door and waited. She followed him inside, and when they passed the hearth, she paused. "Silas," he turned. "I don't know how to give anything back yet." "You don't have to give. Just stay." She nodded once, small but certain, and she did. The lambing season came on sudden and hard. It started with a frost that clung too long to the soil, followed by a week of raw wind that tore through the cottonwood grove and scattered loose straw across the barn rafters. The ewes had begun to drop early, and there weren't enough hands to cover the night watches. Silas didn't ask Sylvie to help. He just left the lantern burning in the kitchen and the barn door unlatched. She came out wrapped in her shawl and found him kneeling in the straw beside a trembling ewe, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, hands slick with birth fluid and mud. He glanced up only once, then nodded toward the clean rags stacked beside him. "Hold her steady." Sylvie knelt without hesitation, pressing her palms to the ewe's flank, whispering soft nonsense to keep her still. The lamb came breech, legs tucked wrong, and Silas worked slow, voice low, coaxing it free with the patience of someone who'd done this more times than he could count. When the lamb finally slipped into the world, wet and blinking, Sylvie helped clear its face and press it near the mother's belly. The ewe gave a low, rattling bleat and began to lick her newborn clean. They sat in the straw after that, backs against the stall wall, watching the pair settle into each other. "You remember the first one you saved?" Sylvie asked, brushing hay from her skirt. Silas reached for his flask and took a pull. 2 years ago, storm came through, near tore the fence line in half. Found a lamb buried in snow, legs all stiff. Thought it was gone. But it lived. Barely. Fed it molasses and milk from a rag for 3 days. It followed me around for weeks after. Wouldn't leave the porch. She smiled, small and tired. "What happened to it?" Coyote got it the next winter. "Oh, that's ranching. You save what you can and lose the rest." The wind rattled the door and Sylvie pulled her shawl tighter. "I never saw birth before, not like that. There's something about it, how quiet it is right after. Closest thing to church I've ever known." She looked at him, eyes catching the faint gold of the lantern light. "You ever think about having your own, my own, children?" He rested his arms on his knees. "Used to. Then I figured I'd never find someone who'd stay. I'm still here." He met her gaze, steady. "I know. They didn't speak again until the rooster called through the dark. Sylvie stood, brushing hay from her skirt, and reached for the lantern. "I can wash up first. Then start breakfast." "You don't have to." "I want to." She left the door open behind her. Silas watched her go, the edges of her shawl catching the wind like wings. By the time he came in, the stove was lit and the pan already warm. She was barefoot, hair braided back, sleeves rolled tidy to the elbow. There was a bowl of cornmeal batter beside her and a pan of fat heating slow. "I ain't made cakes in years," she said without turning, "but I remember the smell." He leaned against the doorframe. "Smells better than anything I've had in a long while." She didn't answer, just flipped the first cake with a practiced motion. Her hands were steady now, not from repetition, but from something settling deeper. He poured coffee and set a cup beside her. She nodded. "I used to think a kitchen was just another cage. And now, it's quiet here. I don't feel watched anymore." She brought the pan to the table and they ate with their hands. Syrup dripped onto tin plates, steam curling from the cups. Outside, the light was just beginning to change, the sky gone pale with the promise of sun. "I've been thinking," Sylvie said, licking syrup from her thumb. "That storeroom. What about it? If you clear out the sacks and crates, I could turn it into something proper, maybe a place to sew. Or keep herbs. I remember some of what my mother taught." He nodded slowly. "You want it, it's yours. I don't want to be idle, you're not." She looked at him, something shifting behind her eyes. "Would you be angry if I wanted more than just helping with chores? Not if it's something real. I want to learn the books you keep, the ones with maps and ledgers. I want to know what it takes to run this place, not just live in it." He set down his fork. "I'll teach you. You sure? You ask for more like it's a crime. It's not. I've never been allowed to want more. You are now." She looked down at her plate, quiet for a long while. Then, without lifting her eyes, she said, "I think I'm starting to believe you." Silas didn't reach for her, didn't crowd. Just let the words hang between them, like the last chill of spring giving way to warmth. "I'll build another shelf in the storeroom," he said after a while. "You'll need a place for your books." She smiled then, not small, not hidden, just full and certain, and for the first time it didn't feel like she was borrowing someone else's life. It felt like she was beginning her own. By late May, the cottonwoods had leafed out fully, their branches heavy with green that quivered in the slightest breeze. The creek ran clearer now, swollen with snowmelt, and the pasture grass brushed the bellies of the younger calves. The land was coming into its own again, and Sylvie had begun to do the same. She stood at the ledger table in the corner of the main room, her brow pinched as she tallied columns in careful pencil. Her handwriting had steadied over the weeks, still slanted, but legible. She didn't ask Silas to check her sums anymore. She only called him over when she was sure they were right. "You've been short on salt blocks since last winter," she said as he leaned over her shoulder, his hands still dusty from the corral. "I figured. Meant to take inventory, never got around to it." She circled the number. "You'll need 5 more before the next wagon comes through." He nodded. "Send a note with Charlie, he'll be riding into town for seed." Sylvie closed the book and wiped her hands on her apron. "You trust him. He's steady. Grew up on a place like this, knows what things cost." She hesitated. "You think he'd be willing to help with the south field? I can't lift the seed sacks alone." "He'll help if I ask, but you don't have to carry what's not yours." She met his eyes. "It is mine now." "You said so." He gave a slow nod, not of approval, but of recognition. That evening they walked the edge of the west pasture where the grass rolled down into a low hollow. The cattle had found shade under the cottonwoods, their movements slow and unhurried. Sylvie carried a small sack of dried herbs, gathered from the far ridge yarrow, golden currant leaf, and bits of early wild mint. She'd begun drying them in the sunroom, pressing them flat between panes of mesh she'd fashioned from old window screens. "I've been thinking of making tonic," she said, brushing her palm across a cluster of thistle. "Not to sell, just for the house." "What kind?" "Something for fever. Maybe cough." "My mother used to boil onion and pine bark, but I think I can do better." "You trust it'll work?" "I trust I can learn enough to try." Silas watched her crouch to collect a few more mint leaves, her movements sure, her hair caught at the nape of her neck with a strip of muslin. "Seems to me you've always learned what you needed." She stood, brushing her hands. "Not always. I didn't know how to live quiet until I came here." "You were always that woman. Just needed a place that let you be her." They walked on, not speaking, the hush between them no longer cautious. It was the kind of silence that grew from knowing someone's pace, when to speak and when not to, how to walk shoulder to shoulder without needing to fill the air. When they reached the gate, she turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I've been thinking about the storeroom." He waited. "I want to clear out the last of the grain bins, turn it into something more permanent, a proper space with shelves, a work table. I could keep records there too, for the stock and the supplies." "You plan on staying that long?" "I do." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Then let's build it right." The next week passed in the kind of work that left them too tired for words by dusk. They stripped the storeroom to the beams, laid new planks, repainted the windowsill. Sylvie chose pale green paint, the color of willow buds in early spring. Silas built her a long table from leftover pine boards, sanded smooth at the corners. On the final evening, after the last nail was driven and the floor swept clean, she leaned against the doorway, arms folded across her chest. "I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who had her own space." "You're more than that." "How so?" He stepped in beside her. "You're the kind who builds something with both hands and doesn't ask permission to keep it." She didn't respond right away. "Then, you give me room without asking for anything back." "I don't need a return. I want to give one anyway." He looked down at her, the shape of her face outlined in the soft lamp glow. "What is it?" She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "This." He took her hand, thumb curling over the back of it. They stood like that, the new room behind them, the quiet of the ranch wrapping around the house like a blanket. Later that night, she knocked on the frame of his doorway, barefoot, her braid pulled over her shoulder. "I don't want to sleep in the guest room anymore." He didn't move, didn't speak right away. "I want to wake up beside the man who gave me back my name," she added. He stepped aside. In the weeks that followed, the world outside the ranch kept moving. Storms came and went. The creek rose and fell. Cattle were bought and sold, but inside the house, time slowed into something softer. She planted lavender beneath the kitchen window. He built a bench beneath the cottonwoods where she liked to read. They argued sometimes, quiet and short, like people who knew a storm would pass and leave things better after. He taught her how to drive the wagon team. She taught him how to dry herbs with steam and cloth. One morning, as they stood on the porch watching a hawk slice across the sky, she rested her head against his shoulder. "I want to raise children here." He didn't speak for a while. "Not because I need to," she said. "Because I want to with you." He turned, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Then we will." Years later, the storeroom would be full of jars, ledgers, and tiny handprints pressed in flour dust. The porch would creak under the weight of small feet racing toward the barn. And in the warm hush of every evening, Sylvie and Silas would sit together beneath the cottonwoods. No longer people searching for a place, but two souls who had built one with sweat, soil, and a kind of love that grew quiet and strong as roots beneath the earth.